I heard the starter dose for the ego death territory with mushrooms was 3.5 grams. So me and my friend got 3.5 grams each, dove in, and it was the start of me realizing that that was possible, that I could write my own story, that it wasn't predictated by anyone other than myself.
Roger that, ground control. Preparing for second stage separation. Guidance systems online.
So you came to Costa Rica for the first time on 23rd of December 2025.
Yes.
It was a big step for you to come here because you basically gave up your job and the opportunities in US for a life elsewhere.
Yeah, I've never taken a step like this before.
Tell me, what were the circumstances that led you to that decision?
Just starting to see enough of the cracks in the system to the point where I did not feel safe in relying on it and also contributing to it further. And I figured that the only way forward was to completely step out and create my own path that would make it easier for other people to follow their own as well, to get out of that system.
What were the triggers? I assume they came slowly over time, or tell me about the process of getting to the point of courage that you need to leave.
I feel like the triggers have always been there from the start, ever since I was a kid. I always found inconsistencies in the system and the ways that my parents would explain to me how things worked, especially with things like credit cards and insurance. I was able to see that it was a scam packaged up as being helpful when it was just extraction.
How old were you at that time?
Oh, I was like around 5, 4 when I started seeing through it. And as I'm being raised through the system and just having these beliefs hammered into me, there's just this big disconnection of who I really was and who they were trying to shape me into becoming. There's a lot of ostracization along the way with that, with being someone that I wasn't. And then getting to the point around my adolescence and teenage years where I felt so ostracized that it wasn't really much of a risk, just completely detach and start following my own path. That made a lot more sense than what everyone else was focused on and talking about.
So you felt distant from the system already before school.
Yes.
How was school, high school, that entire path for you?
Felt very abrasive, just going against the grain and just doing the opposite of what felt natural and efficient. It was just like going completely against my nature.
How many would you estimate of the kids in your school felt in a similar way?
Like if I was lucky, like close to 2 to 5%, if I was able to even notice them there.
So 1 in 20, 1 in 30?
I would say less than that even.
So if you have a class of 30, there would be
Like maybe 1 or 2
maybe
people.
1 or 2.
Yeah.
Did you connect with those?
Yes.
You
Very
formed
easily.
your own little tribe inside the school. Tell me about that.
We were pretty much just always ostracized together. There was a group around straying from the norm, I guess you could say. And the kind of misfits or the people that were pushed to the side kind of would naturally come together, and we would be able to understand each other very well with a lot of nonverbal communication between words, just being very empathic and communicating on different levels. I don't think I was fully aware of it at the time, but looking back, it makes sense that I was just naturally drawn to these people, and communication was just always seamless.
Did they share any characteristics?
Yeah. I would say a lot of it you can call neurodivergent, so ADHD, autism, anything under that spectrum or umbrella.
So it's interesting, these so-called neurodivergent kids, wherever the neurodivergency comes from, whether it's heavy metals or whether it's inborn, that you need to have this type of, well, as they call deficiency, which is actually an empowerment for you to see it through the system.
Yes.
What other characteristics did they share? How did they use their time compared to the regular kids?
I've noticed a lot more creativity, a lot more depth in terms of the subjects or activities that would interest them. They were always very intriguing, out there. It was always like they were focusing on the things that no one else was focusing on, and on a level that rivaled masters.
Once you figure out that there's something wrong from your perspective in the system itself, and then you meet others who have a similar attitude, how do you start processing that reality? Do you start processing that together or individually? Does everyone have their own particular way? Are you drawn to particular type of psychedelics or computer worlds? What are the hobbies that engage you?
Technology is definitely a big part of it. That's what I noticed more as a kid, just being less attached to the spiritual world. Everyone in that space was always just gravitated to tech in some way, whether it was some sort of creativity or just tinkering with things, breaking it down so you could understand it more fully, or video games, accessing and playing with different worlds, different spaces. I guess this place has felt so unnatural that there's been a drive to like explore what else there is, what alternate universes you can create. And then as I've gotten older, psychedelics definitely become a commonality in these spaces. I feel like it just fits in with the out-of-the-box thinking and just kind of adds gasoline to that fire and allows you to really propel with thinking out of the box and finding new ways of thinking, new ways of building already existing systems that are more efficient and more balanced for everybody involved.
So using psychedelics in a very targeted way to define and extricate yourself further from the matrix. Tell me about your first journey. What type of psychedelic and what happened, and where did that path take you?
So I started with LSD in high school. I was 17. It was an interesting experience. Went through a lot of emotions because the person that I was not really dating but talking to at the time, she had a disagreement with me entering that space, and I went in anyways because I knew that it was for me. I had felt the calling for a long time. And even though it was troubling navigating those emotions, it sparked something in me. And I feel like with most people that kind of experience would push people away, but it just left me with more curiosity of what there was, especially with what I heard about what kind of experiences it can induce in people and how it can help you become a better person and in turn make the world around you a better place. And so I kept exploring. Didn't really feel like I had much to lose, so I just completely dived in. And I didn't really have my space to have my own experiences for a long time because I was spending most of those experiences almost babysitting my friends, because they were also intrigued by it because of me. I was introducing them to these spaces. So for, I would say, about 10 to 12 journeys, I didn't really get anywhere with it because my mind was just too scattered in many different places, worrying about, first of all, them, making sure that everything was okay with them, making sure they weren't too loud so that my parents wouldn't wake up, because we would do it in the middle of the night. And I
Your
had
parents were sleeping in the bedroom while you were doing acid upstairs.
yeah, we would, every month, 2 months, we would get together, get some LSD, some mushrooms, very occasionally, only like 2 or 3 times, mostly LSD during that time. And yeah, we figured that the nighttime was a good time. We weren't going to be bothered by parents unless we woke them up. But that part of the journey started to get a little bit frustrating because I wasn't going at the depth that I was expecting. I wasn't receiving the messages I was expecting. And it eventually just got to the point where I'm like, all right, like, are these people lying about what you can get from this stuff? Like, are they just over exaggerating it? Or is this actually real? And then it got to the point where I was seeking an ego death. And I heard the starter dose for the ego death territory with mushrooms was 3.5 grams. So me and my friend got 3.5 grams each, dove in, and that was one of the biggest turning points of my life, that first breakthrough. It almost felt like I came out of the womb again with 18 years of knowledge. And I was able to just like start off from a blank slate with a lot of valuable tools and almost recreate myself, because I had found that the way that the world had created me up until that point was inauthentic. It wasn't true to me. And it was very relieving to start off from just a blank slate, or what it felt like a blank slate. There was still a lot that I had to rewire from that point, but it was the start of me realizing that that was possible, that I could write my own story, that it wasn't predictated by anyone other than myself. And that's where things really started to kick off. That was a good year after I started my journeys, or
How
maybe
old were you
close
then?
to. I just turned 18 that summer. Kind of led me into the whole spiritual journey, the spiritual side of things. It opened my eyes up that there was a lot more than what I could physically perceive with my 5 senses. Before that experience, I was atheist. I grew up in a Christian family, but there was just so much skewed truth that it didn't resonate with me, and I just perceived it all as false and just completely shunned it away. And that's part of why I went to psychedelics, was to get some answers with that. And then that breakthrough experience opened my eyes up to the fact that there was more out there. I didn't know if it was God or what name to put it, but I knew that there was some higher power at play. And that just intrigued me further. There was, even though like that was the biggest experience at the time for me, that was just like the beginning of that side or that level of the psychedelic experience.
So you felt for the first time that you were living as a character in a narrative, and suddenly through your breakthrough you got a feeling that maybe you can control the narrative.
Yes. Even if this is a completely biological world, there's still aspects of a simulation embedded in that. And starting to wonder recently if that's as designed. Whether it was some higher power or other humans that have kind of seen through the system but with a darker lens and try to establish control in any ways that they can. And I feel like those are some examples or reflections of that.
What's your current take on the universal order?
It's a massive spiritual war going on. between, I guess, good and evil, dark and light. And a lot of the people that hold esoteric knowledge in this world use it for personal gain, for negativity, and that's part of what is that darker side of the force. And I feel like now, more recently, that esoteric world is being shared with light now, and that can bring in a lot more balance to what is going on, a lot more cohesion and symbiosis. Every breakthrough has been linked to one another. Like, they're all part of a big web. Each part is intricately important for each little step of your journey. I found that with every breakthrough, it was just an incremental steps towards this timeline that I perceive as heaven. That's most in alignment with who I am, with what I wish the world to be, with what I wish. It started to get to the point where it was almost pointing to a mission. And it started feeling very important, a lot bigger than what I was expecting to carry. And I listened to it. I followed it. It felt true. And through that path was assisting others on that journey. Because I knew firsthand how difficult it was to find my way with that medicine, or with any medicine, in a way that was efficient, because these are very powerful substances, and they can take you in so many different directions very easily depending on internal or external stimuli. Like, set and setting is very important. And I feel people don't really understand the importance of that set and setting, especially early on. And it took me a long time to figure that out for myself. And along that journey, I found that I was able to help other people not have to go through as many of those dead ends or hardships with the medicine. So as I've went through that journey of facilitating for friends, I had an experience where I was offered some changa around a fire. And through that experience, what I received was very clear that I was going to get home, order everything required to make changa, and serve it. And I didn't second guess it at all. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to argue. You have been right this whole time up until now. I'm not going to second guess it. I'm going to trust.
There was a voice during one of your journeys telling you that, or?
Multiple. It was through different lenses. I remember having a part of the experience was, I don't know if you had the experience of fully breaking through, and the experience of coming back into your body and opening your eyes again, seeing the trees in your hands for what feels like the first time, and having that gratitude of like I'm a human again.
For sure.
Yeah.
A couple of times.
And I had the experience of having that experience through the lens of multiple points of view in different religions, different medicines, different countries, different ways of serving the medicine. And part of the message that I received from that was there's no one right way of healing or doing this medicine work. And that was part of what had pushed me back from fully facilitating these experiences, was I felt a sense of imposter syndrome because I wasn't born into an indigenous tribe and taught like how to serve ayahuasca. So like, what did I know? And they're like, dude, there is no one right way. Like, you follow your own way. That is like the path of a shaman, or whatever. And I felt that I received like the blessing from so many different shamans from all around the world. They're like, you are ready, like, trust into it, like, follow the path. And yeah, like I said, I didn't second guess it. 2 days after, I ordered all the materials. As soon as I got home, just waited like a day or two for them to come and put everything together. Started serving my roommates at the time. Very grateful that they allowed the space for me to practice and for them to trust me in that way.
Was this also with multiple substances or DMT? Or?
This was mostly DMT. It started with freebase DMT, and I didn't really like the whole vape juice mixture with the propylene glycol. It felt counterintuitive to be adding a synthetic polymer with such a sacred substance. Like, yeah, you're having like this beautiful experience, but along the way you're ingesting like some ickiness. That's just what it felt like for me. And it also had this weird tendency to pop sometimes because the crystal would form against the coils, and so whenever you would hit it, it would pop as you're blasting through, and that just was not the vibe. And then I had that Changa experience. I'm like, okay, this really does make DMT a lot more efficient, a lot easier to use, easier to serve. It's a lot closer to home because you can just light a bowl or roll it into a joint.
Talk to me about the DMT molecule itself. What do you know about it through your experience, and what do you think it does to the human mind? Why is it possible that a plant molecule is able to open such profound transformations and understanding?
DMT is a very intriguing molecule compared to other alkaloids or other drugs or medicines, psychedelics you could find in your natural environment. The main thing is how simple of a molecular structure it is. It's essentially like not too far off from the basic building blocks of all life. So it's derived from tryptophan. You can find it anywhere in the soil and plants.
Banana.
Mm-hmm. And it essentially just pulls it out of the soil and does some cool things. And DMT is not like too many steps off from it. And one thing that I've noticed is that you'll like randomly smell DMT or DMT in the wild, but that's from bacteria that produces indole molecules, which are like it's basically that ring that is like the main chunk of DMT, and that indole ring is easily creatable with every living thing just because it's like one of the basic building blocks. So you always like smell things that are similar to it. Some flowers even have like a DMT like smell. And I feel like it just makes sense that that basic building block is the key to perceiving more of what there is to perceive out of the 5 senses of the human body.
It's almost like looking at a molecular structure like Lego blocks, and if it's has a very basic setup, it can lock into different Lego blocks. How many guided tours have you performed so far with your friends and your network?
I lost count, honestly. I would say at least 20, 30. I only recently got to the point where I felt very comfortable. I feel like up until that point, it was always people coming to me saying like, hey, I'm feeling like I need an experience, or me and my friends will make a plan to all get together and we'll have a little ceremony. We'll just do a circle one at a time. And even though I've been serving, I still felt that sense of imposter syndrome because I didn't fully experience the depth of what it was that I was serving. I still felt a sense of fear of continuing to break through over and over. or not even that, but experiencing the different layers of the substances outside of just purely breaking through. The ones past it, the ones right before it. And I feel like it's allowed me to serve better because I feel like I've been able to help a lot of people understand and integrate their experiences because of the similarities that I've had with mine. And that's what this past year was for me, was really diving into that personal exploration with the substance and fully understanding it, fully understanding myself, the world around me, the systems at play. And it was through that interpersonal journey that really solidified my belief that like I had to do something different. It wasn't just, serving changa with my friends on the side while I was working a 9 to 5. Like I was still feeding and perpetuating a system that I did not believe in. And I couldn't scrutinize it if I was also contributing to it. And I've found that the only authentic way to navigate that was to completely detach and start what felt natural and what was more aligned with being a human and living on Earth with other living beings.
How many years did you double track and with your work life, working for the empire, and at the same time being a young, aspiring medicine man?
The past 5 years, yeah.
So you know very well what it is like for you to live in that dual dimension.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
That was a challenge. I feel like that's why I was in it for so long. Even though I was seeing the truth here and there, I would get sucked right back in by being a part of the Matrix in various ways. And it was a very long, slow, gradual process of like slowly detaching just various aspects of the Matrix that had managed to grab a hold of me as I've grown up in it. Whether it was like the media I consumed and the food I ate and the music I listened to, like these were all things that I slowly had to tweak and let go of so I could make space for what I felt aligned with.
What does it take to jump into the void? I assume that other characters have come to you with similar insecurities as you had before you had the courage to step out. What is it usually that you find where you can help them find their own trigger to crossing the bridge?
That's the tough part, is we really do like create our own prisons, I feel, and anchors in the Matrix. And it's kind of difficult to tell someone that they basically have to change so many aspects of their life that it's overwhelming and they just get blocked off from that idea. So even though they can see through the systems and that there's a problem with it and that they must detach, I feel like unless they really dive in and face fear head on and learn what needs to be learned so that they can detach themselves. DMT is really easy access to very potent truth. And if you can work with it, if you have the strength to go in again and again and see some hard to see parts of yourself and confront it and look at it, accept it, love it, and listen to what the lessons are provided and how to transmute it, that's the only way through. And I feel like that's what each of my breakthroughs have been, was they're all part of this same web, but it's all little steps for how to alchemize trauma and inauthenticity that I've picked up. And in turn, that essentially rewires your DNA, makes things more aligned to a connection with God. And without going through and rewiring that stuff, the DNA line is muddied, and it's being influenced by so many external forces, whether it was other traumatic experiences down your family tree or just what you were raised and brought up in. And each of those behaviors and experiences slowly tweaks and wires the DNA in a different way. And until you go back and look at these lessons and integrate these truths, you're just going to be in the same loops. And I feel like that's what my breakthroughs have consisted of, is just incremental rewiring and realigning to the point where my channel was just getting clearer and clearer and clearer and more connected to the divine, more connected to God, to my higher self. And instead of me being a culmination of the world around me and the people around me, I was just me, myself, and God, and just being as direct of a channel as I can be of that divine energy.
How would you encapsulate your daily life, and how is it in accordance with that vision?
I feel like first it starts with just embodying a pure being, just walking as Jesus would walk, as any other ascended master, just being a good person, spread goodness unto others, and then a step above that, trying to source good food, making sure that you're not contributing to the suffering of other living beings. And then a step further, I feel with technology, there's a lot of control around it that I didn't see before, that Changa really has opened my eyes to. I didn't really expect it to teach me about those kinds of things, but it would go into technology and ways that I had to be more self-reliant on it. And it showed me many visions of almost like a solar punk world where it was very technologically advanced but also very natural, and there was a symbiosis involved. And through these experiences with DMT, it's brought up curiosity in how technology is set up in our current world. And so I started doing more research into that and realized that it was a huge arm for surveillance and used in so many negative ways to spy on every little aspect of your life, so they can get to this point of being able to predict patterns and behavior and actions and make decisions based off of that. And through that, I found how important it was to have technical sovereignty and personal control over your data and these services, because at any point it can be flipped on us with our current reliance on technology. It's pretty much embedded in every part of our lives. And it's with digital payments, with medical, it's literally almost every part of life now you need some form of technology to access. And at any point, these big giant companies that we rely on can just turn on us. And the only way that we can get these services is by abiding. And I don't like that. I don't think that that's a good foundation for a healthy society. And that's a very slippery slope as well. That's not safe for us as humans. In a similar way that I would look at food, where Changa has been guiding me towards becoming more self-reliant, supporting more local foods, more natural ways of production, even getting to the point where I'm creating and growing my own food. Still working towards that. but I aim to tackle tech in that same way, hosting my own services, like just small examples. Instead of relying on Google for storage, I can just, configure a Raspberry Pi, have a SSD hooked up to it, and I have cloud storage. Granted that I have it connected to the internet and all that, but... Or I could make it Bluetooth if I wanted and connect a little Bluetooth module and have a Bluetooth mesh network for my cloud storage for my land and for other people on my land to have access to. I feel like with something that people don't fully understand about privacy is that it's not really a software issue. It's mostly a hardware thing. And people try to install these privacy-centric tools and software with having a device that is physically compromised in some way. What really surprised me through this tech research was how deep this surveillance tech goes, and pretty much every single consumer product has malware in some form on it. So with Libra booting, every single Intel chip, CPU chip, it's essentially the brain of a computer, since 2007 has this thing called management engine installed on it. It's pretty much Mossad spyware installed on your motherboard, on your chip, on a root level. It's able to basically have access to everything on your computer, key logging, what's going on on your screen at a given moment in time. And there's some sneaky little bastards. Like, you can delete it and then it'll reinstall itself next time you reboot. So you basically have to open up the entire computer, physically wire into the CPU, delete the management engine, and then install extra lines of code to prevent itself from reinstalling.
How many people can do that?
I haven't. I relied on LibraBoot just for time's sake, and also I didn't really feel like physically wiring into a motherboard. Yeah, I'm comfy with tech, but I didn't want to do all that. And I was
Okay,
also
so-
on a time crunch with like getting everything ready to leave the States, so I just got one from them already pre-made.
So how far have you gotten in terms of building your own privacy solution? Something that you can also help others with.
I would say I'm about 80-90% of the way there with replacing most of what you would use in your daily life, using Graphene OS. It's only supported on Pixels right now because of the security of their chip. The Graphene team is talking with another phone manufacturer to create their own Graphene phones and their own hardware for it. That won't happen until like 1-2 years from now at least. So right now, the Google Pixel is the only thing that's compatible. I know it's Google, but the Graphene team has done a lot of great things in terms of hardening security for the average everyday person, whether it's just someone wanting to detach their life from Google and they don't like the idea of these big tech corporations making money off of their data, to journalists and politicians and diplomats, people that have a more like a higher threat level. I would definitely recommend Graphene for them, but I think the best thing that you can do is just having the Graphene completely anonymous, not tied to you in any way, and having a separate phone for more normal activities, I would say. Or just having two Graphenes. One for your normal everyday identity and another one for more isolation and security. They make it really difficult to do any sort of alternative to big tech surveillance. Like, one thing that I found is extremely difficult to completely detach from the Google sphere if you want to do anything. First of all, notifications on Android run off of Google servers, so you kind of have to like kiss that goodbye and use other more battery intensive alternatives to get notifications sorted. So it really just depends on like how much convenience you want, because with super hardened privacy, it's clunky. It's not super easy to set up or to use. I mean, it's relatively easy to use once set up, but it takes a little bit more steps, a little bit more taps to get to the same result, or an alternative of the same result that might not be better, but most of the time I found with this open source software is that it's light years better than what these big tech companies are doing, and it's made by a bunch of people that are doing it for the love of it, and yeah.
Okay, so graphene, selecting open source wherever possible.
Mm-hmm.
What about the rest puzzle pieces like money, servers, assets? Where do you see that in the future?
So I would like to see self-hosting becoming a much more common thing. That's ultimately the best solution, because even with these open source apps, you're using someone else's servers. You still have to audit these teams and these companies to make sure that they have your best interests in mind and that they're not just sheep and wolves, or a wolf in sheep's clothing. So with crypto and with banking, first of all, banking is such a vampiric system. I want to say like close to the root of all the world's problems is the banking system and how it's set up and how it's essentially established for control. You also have to understand that banks do not know how to manage money. Like, you shouldn't be trusting all this energy that you're putting towards creating this capital, and then you're just giving it to someone that's just doing wild shit with it that you would never even conceive. And first and foremost, just like with tech, I want the control of my own cash and my own money. That is my energy. I don't trust someone else to handle that, so I'm going to handle it myself. Be a self-custodian. And the biggest pathway for that is crypto, or the best pathway for that is crypto. I feel like different cryptocurrencies have different use cases. So Bitcoin is very good at behaving as a network, but you also have to understand that it's a very transparent blockchain. So every single transaction is logged for everyone to see publicly. And also, you can see how much currency every single wallet is holding. And that, I don't know, that opens you up to being targeted and being hacked. Especially with, I don't know, even with the most secure hardware nowadays, even with graphene, like, there's still going to be vulnerabilities. There's still backdoors somehow, not intentionally placed, but that's just like the natural way things work. Nothing is like completely secure with tech. You just kind of have to add enough layers to the point where it becomes not worth it to pursue. But if people know that there's a big bounty at the end, then that could incentivize them to pay more time. But also, that's where Monero comes in. No one's able to see how much you're holding. No one's able to see how much you're paying to whom. But it's all accounted for, and it uses the same blockchain technology, just without the transparency. So it's essentially using cash in the crypto world. Because what I see happening in the near future is us transitioning completely over to digital currency. We're already doing most of that without even realizing. Our banks, it's digital. It's not an actual representation of cash. If everyone goes to the bank right now and asks for all their cash, they don't got it. It's just it's fairy dust. It's just numbers on a screen in a database. So it doesn't take much for them to just transfer over to another digital database that has superior technology. But with that, there's still, I feel like they can still establish a level of control even if you're holding Bitcoin. You lose that freedom of cash transactions, person-to-person transactions that are silent, that are convenient, and also sometimes you don't want people to know what you're paying for, who you're paying with. And with Bitcoin, I see a network that can be utilized as a foundation to build self-hosted services and community-made infrastructure on the internet on top of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin also has different layers that you can use, like Lightning for faster, day-to-day transactions. And then there's, I think, some privacy layers. I haven't looked too deeply into that, but I've heard it's not as robust as Monero. Yeah.
So tell me some of your initial results or personal stories with anonymous stories of what you've seen in people in terms of transformation potential with DMT under your guidance.
It's been nothing short of a beautiful journey. Like, there's so much medicine in just being in that space and facilitating an experience like that. You just see in real time, like, fear and just any baggage that they may be holding just gets melted away, and they're able to see themselves more clearly and their life more clearly. And every single person that I've served, they never fail to mention like how important their journeys have been, and they're always thanking me for helping to facilitate those journeys. I've pretty much seen all of them just dive more into who they are and what they came here to do. Like, I have this artist friend. They really dove into their art, I feel, through that experience. Not just because of it, like they're always on that journey, but it almost like seemed like it allowed them to express themselves more fully through that. And it's become like an avenue where it's able to like lift them up and help them go through life in a more fluid way, where they're not as attached to the matrix, but like they have this blanket, this cushion that's facilitating their journey.
So DMT is pushing them towards a more sovereign lifestyle.
Yes.
For everyone. That's interesting.
You really have to work with it though. It's not going to do everything for you.
Right. Like in ayahuasca, if you don't take action within the next 7 days, so it's just going to go back to square zero.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you facilitate that? Are you facilitating? Are you encouraging them to take action? Or how do you make that happen? So it's not just another vision parade.
I want to say up until very recent, I've only just been serving the vision parade, and I haven't really stressed the importance of integration because I never really embodied it myself as fully as I have now. And that's what this last year has really completed within me, is not only being able to serve, but having almost a toolkit at the end to help them navigate what they experience and integrate it. And I feel like I just did that to one of my friends before I left. I just felt called to gift him pretty much all the Changa that I had on me at the time. I had gifted like a little bit of the Changa to one of my friends, and then he gave it to him. And I was like, you know what, that was a good choice. Like, I'm glad you chose like a good person that could be able to carry it.
Comes back with interest.
And so I was like, you know what, you deserve a little bit more than that if you're gonna do some journeying. And so I gifted him some that I had, and also like explained how to work with it, really turbocharge your growth. But you have to be careful with it, you have to respect it, you have to do your homework. But if you do your homework, if you work with everything that it's giving you and embodying all the lessons that it's showing you, you can go back in fairly quickly. They do get pissed if you go back in and they're like, bro, you got like 5 packets of homework that you haven't even like looked at yet and you're coming for more. Like, nah, go do that and then you can come back. Or sometimes you go in haphazardly and they're like, bro, that was not the time. Like, you should have been working on this, this, and this. Like, I'm busy right now. Go sit over there and think about it. Then you just gotta wait until like it wears off and you're just like, damn, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like disrespect. With proper integration, I feel that you can do it even multiple times a week if you're able to like handle it and carry it. You can fall into like a psychosis or a mania with it if you're not able to like fully hold it, and you'll be able to tell like when it's too much. And it's a very fine line between like insanity and what's it called, ascension.
What are the red flags in terms of combinations or usage, or just to be on the safe side?
So first and foremost, research anything and everything that could possibly interact with Changa. Even simple things that you wouldn't think of, like your cup of coffee or cacao in the morning. Just that little stimulation can add an effect on the journey. Cannabis can have an effect on the journey. It's not, I wouldn't say good or bad, but it has an effect. Like with the stimulants, it can add an almost turbocharged energy to it. Same with nicotine. Cannabis adds almost like a playful, cartoony nature to it. But then there's other substances that are dangerous. So first and foremost, like antidepressants, which I feel like a lot of people go to antidepressants for the same reasons that you would go to plant medicines for. And sometimes they overlap. It can be deadly to combine like SSRIs and an MAOI. Because with the SSRIs, it allows the serotonin to float in the brain longer because you're not producing as much of it. So you want to like utilize as much of the serotonin that you got. That's at least the pharmaceutical point of view. And with the MAOI, it slows the breakdown of neurochemicals. And that can basically, the combination can result in a short circuit of built up serotonin in between synapses, and it can cause brain damage or death.
So you got to know your medication and do serious research before you engage.
And a similar result can happen with MDMA because it releases the floodgates of serotonin through your brain. I like to add certain herbs sometimes to the Changa to help potentiate or some of the effects. So I mostly use passion flower, damiana, and marigold. Damiana and the passion flower kind of calms the nerves. I feel it's really helpful for like right when you're entering that space, because it can be like a little bit jarring to have a little bit of central nervous system downregulation. And the marigold, I don't really know exactly what it does. It's just a nice color, and I find it adds a nice energy. And as I've been experimenting with like different plants with the Changa, it almost brings out the energy of these different plants. So I perceive DMT as the vehicle, and then these other plants as the drivers. So you're going to be blasted off one way or another, but you're being blasted off with like plant allies, I feel.
And in your case, it has, in a big time, for a while now. You've reformulated your life around it.
Oh yeah, I've pretty much like reconfigured almost every aspect, I feel. At least the ones that I'm conscious of.
And you also changed your career, as I understand. You're doing counseling with the medicine,
Mm-hmm.
learning and advising privacy solutions. What else has the DMT shaped in your life?
So one big thing was music. That was like one of the first missions it shed light on. I always had some interest in music, but I always felt, again, that imposter syndrome, like, oh, I didn't play the drums when I was 5 years old. It's a little too late for me, kind of thing. And they shed light on how much good music can do for the world and how much love it can spread to such a vast group of people. And then it also got me dabbling with tattooing and expressing art in that way, in symbolism that is multidimensional and I don't know, almost as like a reminder of the other aspects of existence other than this physical reality.
Someone who has never heard of DMT could look at you and say, there's this dude making tattoos, living like a hobo, exiting the system, and smoking some shit. Right?
Yeah.
That would be the perception of
Mm-hmm.
most people who are deeply embedded in their own narrative, right?
Yeah.
So you're not too bothered about that perception, I assume.
Mm-mm. 'Cause, I mean, I've dabbled with it so many times myself. I feel like there's still like a little like 5% of me left was like, bro, what are you doing? But it's just I feel like I've been woken up one too many times with Changa, and it's just been really pushing me in that direction. Like, hey, this matrix world is not it. Like, you got to start planting seeds and creating an alternative infrastructure, not only for yourself and your family, but so you can share with the community and they can build alongside that. And that's part of, that was one of the biggest reasons why I had to leave the job. It was in the oil field, in the oil industry, and I started seeing in all the ways how detrimental that is for so many people and so many living beings on this planet. And the work that I was doing was saving these terrible companies money. Companies that have like zero empathy for human life and for others other than the people up at top. And I was helping that. Even though I was getting money that I could use towards good, I was still contributing to something that I did not believe in. And it just felt very hypocritical to want to step in a more balanced life while I was still feeding a system that not only I didn't believe in, but was like damaging to me and my soul. And in all the ways that it was damaging me, it was like holding me back from fully expressing who I am and like what I came here to do.
And how did you flip that around?
I started slowly creating a way for me to leave, slowly detaching from various anchors that I had and obligations that I had in the matrix. Setting up a graphene phone, making sure that it was completely anonymous and a way for me to use traditional services without being surveilled in the same way. Like, I had the space to leave probably for like a good 3 months before it happened. I had no idea when or how or what the circumstances were going to be around me leaving, but not only the Changa experiences, but it also started coming to me in dreams, and that's when it got to the point where I couldn't really ignore it. I'm like, this is much more serious than I perceive it to be. And they essentially like made sure that I was prepared in all the ways so that I could just like jump at any time. And then an opportunity
They?
came. My guides and yeah.
Your DMT guides.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
I feel like they're also soul family.
Do they
beings.
have different personalities, characters?
Oh yeah, they're
Or-
from like all different walks of the universe, different dimensions.
So you have a
Yeah.
table full of counselors
Mhm.
out there guiding you.
Mhm.
You're never alone.
No. And they're always like giving me little cosmic winks as I'm walking through reality with like synchronicities, angel numbers.
Where is this superpower going to take you? Or where do you want it to take you? What
Heaven
did you
on
come here
earth.
to do?
To bring in heaven on earth, to anchor in that heaven monad energy and funnel it into this physical plane in any way that I can. To bring more balance here on earth. It's very dense right now. We don't have a lot of that divine energy funneled into any aspect of life, whether it's art or yeah, anything. Food.
But it's also a very abstract description of a future. What do you see more concretely in feel, sound, feel, hear, touch in your future, sense, smell? What is the future you're creating? Do you know?
Yeah.
Or do you need to know?
It's essentially the culmination of like all my favorite things, like everything that like sparks me inside, just like good plants, good food, beautiful people, like community and just like cohesion, and everything is in balance and harmony, and there's no, I don't know, like it's I feel like it's very feasible and it's not too far off from where we are now.
What's your contribution in building that?
So basically creating a pathway for other people to use as an example for them to do themselves.
Building
Because-
templates.
Mm-hmm.
Templates of exit.
Yeah. Because with how deeply rooted everyone is, like this is not something that can easily happen overnight. Like it took me a pretty long time of slowly detaching and slowly reprogramming. And I don't know, that's a lot to wake up to at once. So I feel like having an external example of someone putting that in action, like, hey, I started here and now I'm here. These are the steps I took to get here. You can do it too. So creating these alternative infrastructures basically from the ground up. Like I've kind of lost a lot of trust in corporations and stuff. So I'm like, shoot, I just got to take everything into my own hands. Like first it started with me wanting to make sure that my kids in the future are completely set. My wife in the future is completely set and safe and taken care of. I can't do that in America with, like, unless I'm getting everything from the local farmers market, I can't control what they consume. I would be like unintentionally or intentionally poisoning them by buying food from the supermarkets with how much they allow in our food system. And so like all these things are coming to me during these Changa experiences. I'm like, shit, like how am I gonna have kids in a world where I can't ensure that they have the proper nutrition and not get poisoned while they're trying to get nutrition? I was like, well, shoot, I'm going to have to grow my own food. How do I grow my own food to where it's sustainable? Oh, monoculture is not it. What are alternative ways? And permaculture and self-sustaining food systems. And then tech, like, shoot, I can't have this normal tech that's everyone's using, I gotta make my own services. Make your own services. Conventional house building is pretty extractive and not sustainable. Learn sustainable ways of building your house, and you slowly start becoming self-reliant in all the basic needs of being a human. And then you can show other people how to do that too, so they're not as reliant on the matrix. And also alongside of that, helping people wake up to who they are and how to become more of themselves to facilitate that process. 'Cause I feel like without doing that inner work, it's hard to see the full picture of things and why these shifts are necessary.
Tell me about DMT and Gnosticism.
Mm-hmm. So they're, I feel like, in the same realm. The only difference is that DMT is like interdimensional and Gnosticism is rooted in this third dimension put together by fellow humans that have seen the messages of what this DMT world can bring you to. And it's not just DMT that can get you there. It's like there is no one right way. I just find Changa to be a very efficient way of getting there. You know, you can do it with breath work. You can go be a monk for 20 years meditating. You'll get to the same place, access the same truths. But yeah, like I said, this is just super efficient. Like, couple puffs and you're there and you're getting all this downloads and you can come back within the hour.
So from that perspective, what is the overlap between the DMT vision of the world order and Gnostic world order?
I feel like they're one and the same, as long
Can you
as...
describe it for someone who has no idea what that means?
So, Gnosticism is gnosis, which means to know. And it's basically this belief of Christianity where you're cutting out the middleman. It's basically the oldest sect of Christianity post-Christ. So they took Christianity and then adopted basically all of his teachings into their belief. And then, 200-300 years later, the Council of Nicaea occurred, and then they formed present day the Roman Catholic Church and the skewed version of it. So Gnosticism was formed before our current view of what Christianity is. And they were part of the people that were wiped out during the Crusades to basically hide this truth.
And what is the truth?
That Jesus had kids and a wife, and that threatened the church so much because it's the embodiment of like one of the final stages of the soul's journey, which is coming across your counterpart, which has also gone through the same depth of becoming. And it's essentially two wholes coming together instead of two broken pieces trying to fit. And in that space in between those two holes is God, but then also a divine spark. And that divine spark is through children, but it's only created when both parents have done the work, have completely realigned their DNA and worked through all the traumas to basically act as that clear channel. And then none of that gets passed on to the next generation. It's worked through. They have no baggage. So they are left they are left with like a clean blank slate for them to express themselves how they are from the start.
So,
And that's a threat to the systems that be.
so Jesus had an ordinary life, and
Mm-hmm.
the story is really about how to create a perfect relationship between the masculine and the feminine.
Not ultimately. It's ultimately ascension and going through the whole layers of the soul's journey. It just so happens that the relationship part is part of that end result.
Got it. So what is the relationship between Jesus and Mary have to do with the big universal order that we're talking about?
It's an example of divine balance. Because right now what we see in this world with a lot of the pain and suffering is a result of an imbalance between masculine and feminine energies. And as more people embody what Yeshua and Mary embodied, the more people see that example, the more it spreads and the more everything comes into balance.
So the Gnostic way of looking at things is direct from God to man or woman.
It's direct connection with
It's
God.
a direct connection. There's no separate being needed or priest needed, and that's why it was a threat.
Right.
What else does Gnostic worldview imply or structure? And how is it related to the DMT?
Like I said, I see them in the like two sides of the same coin kind of thing. That's what pulled me into Gnosticism in the beginning. Was I was essentially reading verbatim the experiences that I've embodied and picked up on my own through my my Changa journeys. And
Reading from who?
from like Thomas or Philip in their Gospels.
All right,
And
so
it was
the
like-
disciples were on DMT. That's what you're implying, or maybe suggesting?
No, but maybe. I'm not ruling that out.
At least mushrooms. I mean,
Yeah.
there was talk about Moses taking mushrooms when he was crossing the desert.
Oh? That
Well,
makes
I
sense.
mean, how do you set a bush on fire on the mountain, stuff like that?
I also feel like the bush being on fire could maybe be a mistranslation of some way of preparing that bark or that tree, because it was the acacia tree, which contains a lot of DMT. My first DMT extraction was with the acacia tree.
And where is it mentioned in the Bible?
That's like the tree of life. That was also the tree that
What was the tree that Buddha was reclining against? That was a fig tree, right?
I'm not sure. I haven't.
Right. But I
read
heard a
too
story
much
that the
into
figs
his-
themselves during that time contained psychedelic content. Might have been DMT as well. Might be interesting.
Ah.
I mean, have you ever read
No.
his vision? Let's hear it.
During his meditation, Buddha realized the core teachings known as the Four Noble Truths. These articulate the nature of suffering, its cause, the possibility of cessation, and the path leading to liberation.
Does that ring a bell or no?
Well, I haven't seen what the Noble Truths are yet.
Find some of the visions he got.
Yeah, he saw how beings were trapped in the cycle due to ignorance and attachment. I saw that. I was seeing all the ways that my family was like still entrapped in this system, and the only way out of it was like them going internally and doing the inner work, because it was like a reflection of their internal world.
So
remember seeing that.
was some of your first clients were in your family, immediate family circle?
Yeah. My mom and my uncle.
How did they benefit?
There's always, I don't know, there's just, I can't remember any specifics, but I just always remember them coming out with big smiles on their faces. And my mom always said that it was like the most beautiful roller coaster ride with all the most beautiful things and colors and lessons. It's all very interpersonal, every experience. It's whatever they need to see at that time. And a lot of it you can't really remember. It's just every little single detail of the experience is embedded with lessons, and it's hard to like soak it up all at once, but I find it also like some of it is just like encoded in the DNA in some way, and it'll like pop back out in different aspects of you navigating life. Like you'll act in a different way, and then you like make the connection like, oh wait, I forgot I had that experience. Like every part of the experience can be found in the DNA somehow. Like every action you take expresses certain genes, rewires others. Like if you were to have certain habits that don't get worked through, that would eventually be passed on to your children. Whereas if you go through your life rewiring those habits and traits to where you've worked past them and released them,
Right.
it doesn't get passed on.
But when you're rewiring your energetic self, you're also partially rewiring the people you live with and interact with.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving them a different version of yourself,
Yeah.
which is probably going to be more helpful
Yeah.
for them than the previous version,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how would you describe that process in yourself and in people where that change starts to happen in a concrete sense? What kind of changes do people make after having like a deep breakthrough?
You start acting more authentically, and through that is truth. And I feel like without going in these spaces in whatever form that you choose to take to get there, you're left with a lot of fear of fully expressing yourself from various experiences throughout your life where you've learned that it's easier to close off and to not share the full truth. And I feel like in turn that creates a space where it perpetuates everyone getting stuck in their own cycle. And once you wake up and start acting more authentically, truth is naturally dispersed more. And in that truth, you're able to shed light on things that need shedding light on. Whether that's like having difficult conversations with whoever's in your sphere so that everyone can learn and grow together cohesively. And I feel like if you're not behaving in authenticity, you're perpetuating other people being out of authenticity as well. And so it's just like this.
Which is what modern society is all about, and accelerating
Yes.
inauthenticity, simulation of data, of writing, of creative works, of films and content is being taken over.
Yeah.
What's your take on AI?
It's like a
What's your-
double-edged sword.
Let me ask this way. What's DMT's take on AI?
Ooh, I never really asked specifically well, no, no, I did. It told me to like start self-hosting my own AI. It said that was important. I remember like not really being too big on AI at that point. I was like, bro, why you want me to make some AI? Like, are you serious? And yeah. I think it's a double-edged sword in the way that it's currently being pushed towards with like the direction of surveillance and control. Because I feel like it can be a really helpful tool, but it can also be used, it just depends on what the intention behind its use is, really.
So if DMT helps you redefine the simulation or adjust your perception of the simulation, is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Who created DMT?
Like, I feel like you can't create life without first creating DMT. So it's like, I feel like it was almost unintentional. It just like kind of happened. And it's like an indicator that we are ultimately like a creation of like the one true God of everything. It's benevolent, loving. And even though this physical world has a lot of darkness, we have like these little nuggets of like, wait, this is where we came from. We gotta remember that. So I feel like, yeah, it kind of slipped through the cracks. Like it didn't realize that that was just gonna happen.
DMT came before time itself.
I feel like time can only come with our perception of it. DMT definitely came before us. Like I said, it's like one of the building blocks of life. Like you can't have life without DMT.
Roger that, ground control. Preparing for second stage separation.